Well, welcome. Greetings and salutations, test takers. This is Dean Tenney, aka what am I? The Series 7 guru.
What are
And
you?
I'm here.
What
I'm
are
here
you?
with. Did you get your new mic, Brian? We're getting a little audio feedback from it.
Crap.
Anyways, and my always very special guest, Brian Lee, managing member, Test Geek Exam Prep LLC. If you're new with us, welcome. And our format, just so you're familiar with our format, if you're not, is we start with a debrief of victorious test takers. We do a little housekeeping, and then we roll into live Q&A for the rest of the hour. We end the hour with a drawing for a 30-minute coaching call, and we'll get there. We start on time, we end on time. So our time together is an hour. Some Tuesdays, this happens to be one of those Tuesdays, we have a live stream, or I call it overtime session on Zoom. It's capped at 10 participants. We've reached that cap, but that is open on Tuesday, and I'll give you information about how to do that. If you are going to submit a question in the chat, it helps us if you tell us what exam you're taking, right? And then, that way we know whether we can say, oh, on this exam, that's not a big deal. This exam it is, followed by your questions. It makes it easier for me to pick it out of the chat. All right, let's talk with our debrief. The best debrief I have is if you're taking the 65. If you are taking the 65 on June 12th, you will no longer need anything of a 70. Did you know that, Brian?
I did not.
Well, there you go. So starting June 12th, 65s, you need a 70% to pass. I posted NASAA's press release on our Series 66 Reddit. Our Series 66 Reddit covers 63, 65, 66. So if you'd like to read NASAA's press release, you can find it there, Brian. They said they're not changing the other exams because they think they're, well, I'm paraphrasing, spot on isn't their terminology, but they didn't think that change was necessary.
Wow.
All right, more 65 debrief. Just had somebody pass today, and he said, futures and derivatives are 5 or 6 questions according to test specifications, and he was surprised. I don't know how much time you want to spend on that. If you're not somebody who has an options expertise from a previous exam or not, I don't think it's target rich, and you can spend a lot of time. It's mostly recognition. But anyways, the 5 or 6 he did get. He had one where they got asked about end the money. Brian, what do you think about how much time somebody should devote to options as it relates to the 65?
I get a lot of different feedback. Some people get 2. Some people do, in fact, get 5 questions.
Tough.
Yeah. And they tend to be basic. I get a lot of questions about straddles. I don't even go into straddles.
I think it's a rabbit hole. Just be careful. It's a potential rabbit hole, I guess is what I would say. Yeah. So just be careful about how much you want. The other thing you got asked about was modified after contribution of your adjusted gross income. So strange word. NASAA always uses strange words. He says that's the word they used in the context. But what it really was is if you fund an IRA and it's pre-tax, then you could adjust your gross income by that amount. Is what it sounded like to me, Brian. Wow. Do you know any other definition of modified adjusted gross income?
Not a clue.
Okay, so, and then the third thing he encountered, which is common, a 529 versus a Coverdell. Almost every scenario that I've seen of this, you should come up with the 529 as being the better alternative.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Series 7 debrief. This was somebody who just tested yesterday. They got tested on day trading. So make sure you know a day trading, the minimum is 25 grand for day trading. The Greenshoe keeps coming up quite a bit that keeps coming up. And remember the Greenshoe is 15%. People get tested on what the over allotment is, which is strange. I never heard of that coming up on Series 7 except lately. So yeah, things come up and then they disappear and they go out. Earnings per share, and what they got asked about is there's earnings and number of shares outstanding, and then they just had to divide to come up with earnings per share. I don't think it's usually typical. Usually be more like a PE ratio. Head and shoulders pattern pretty standard on the test. Signal of a reversal. ETFs pretty standard. I mean, when I say standard, I mean the typical draw people get. And you definitely need to be able to contrast ETFs with open-end funds. Make sure you can do that. 10 option calculations. So be careful. Now, Brian and I prepare you to track money in and out of account. And I call that the tried and true method of doing options.
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of people that have shortcuts, so to speak. But when I get somebody who sends me a practice question and they can't track money, the shortcut kind of breaks down. So I always recommend make sure you're okay on contract specifications. What I mean by that is you're not fumbling around that a short put is an obligation to buy. And then if you can track money using a T or plus or minus, whatever you want to do, you're in pretty good shape on those option calculations. And then several that did not, those are used as suitability questions, like don't do a naked call, for example. Max syndication fees in public partnerships is 10%. So they got asked about maximum syndication fees. That is not one that I have heard of before. Now, I did a little short that was very popular about test questions in the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. So there are 6 potential test questions related to that collapse. Test question number 1. Long-term bonds are more volatile than short-term bonds. Test question number 2. There's an inverse relationship with interest rates and bond prices. Now, you think if anybody would understand that relationship, it would be somebody who's got a bank and it has liabilities called deposits and calls assets called bonds. Anyways, people who were their bank depositors started withdrawing money, and to meet their everyday demand for banking, they had to sell some of their bonds. They took a $2 billion hit. Test question number 3. They filed an 8K within 4 business days, saying they just lost $2 billion, material current event. Brian, would have waited perhaps to a weekend. I would have taken advantage of that 4 days and lined up test question number 1. I'm a 4, the pipe. So in the 8K that they filed telling everybody they lost $2 billion, by the way, the people reading the 8K are money people, venture capital people. They said they've hired Goldman Sachs to do a pipe test question, a private investment in a public entity, and they're going to go out and find some quibs. But the discounted price was so much that everybody read the 8K go, oh my God, they are selling the new stock at that price? They must be desperate. And that starts the run on the bank. So the test question about the pipe, a quib test question is 100 million or more in assets under management. And let's see, I think I had one more. Oh, hard way to learn this. Maximum FDIC insurance is 250 grand. That is an SIE test question. I should make fun, Brian. I had a billionaire guy. He was telling me he moves his money around not to have more than 250 grand. I teased him and said, that is ridiculous. Maybe not.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Maybe not. That's why he's a billionaire and I am not. I've been doing evening classes. Next evening class is type of orders. It's $35. You can find it at Dean Tenney Tutoring, setmore.com. When you become a paid alumni, you have access to overtimes like we're doing tonight. You also have access to my free office hour. The overtime is capped at 10. The classes are capped at 10, and the office hours are capped at 5. Once it fills up, I open another one. I just released the second episode of my podcast. Brian and I are working on the Geek and the Guru podcast. We're going to have a whole series. We haven't decided where we're going to have, separate channel, his channel, my channel, everybody's channel, how we're going to do that. But that is in the works. So be looking for that. The one that premiered today is my podcast about the day before your exam. So you can find that. Join us Thursday. If you're taking the SIE, we have an explicated practice test that Notman gave me permission. Brian's is still the best. Kudos to Brian. Brian has given us, our viewers, a 20% discount on his product. And now we have, in our playlist, we have, some playlists have 7, 9 practice exams, but Test Geek's always the best. So that's why Brian's always the front of those playlists, because he has very strong correlation to the actual exam. So I'm not monogamous with the Test Geek, but I still think his is the strongest correlation. Got my Kaplan schedule. If you want to join me for a live class, first month on April of the quarter, I'm going to do an SIE. The second month, I do the 7, and the 66, I do the end of May. I am on that Kaplan schedule, so if you'd like to join me, love to have you. And my discount code at checkout is Guru10. For Brian, it's Guru20 if you want to get his discount. And as I said, at the end of our housekeeping, and we're coming to the end of the housekeeping, we will be doing a drawing for a 30-minute coaching call. Best way to find stuff on my channel is through the playlist. There's 400 videos. You don't want to be looking for a needle in a haystack. Don't be looking for videos. Go to your series exam, find your playlist. It's in suggested watch order. I don't know why people continue to ask me, well, what 5 should I watch? It's the first 5. That's why it's in suggested watch order. But it's buffet. Take what you like, leave what you don't. Okay, first 2 questions were submitted earlier, Brian. You can submit questions to me earlier than the Tuesday live stream. I'll put my email up at the end so you can do that, if you want to. And our first question that was sent in is from a 66 test taker about a bona fide pledge of securities. And bona fide is Latin for good faith. And so if I'm a lender and I'll accept your stock as collateral. So for example, sometimes, Brian, I think my brother's a billionaire because he's got like 100 million shares of this stock, and I realize it's sub-penny pricing and it's like 20 grand. But if I was foolish enough to advance my brother a loan on that in good faith, and then, I accepted that as collateral, I could sell that, and that's not subject to the jurisdiction of the Uniform Securities Act. The way they say is jurisdiction or it's an exempt transaction. They don't have in mind Dean and his brother, by the way. They have like a bank, a lending institution that accepts securities as collateral for loan. I think the best example would be a margin account. Brian, you have anything to add to that as it relates to NASAA exams?
Isn't this one of those, is it an offer or sale of securities?
Yes, and it is not.
And it is not, correct.
It is not. So
I think that's where it's asked.
Yeah. Now, the second question that was submitted was a private placement. Now, I'm not sure here, Jacob, if you're in the chat, whether you were asking about a private placement under the template, the Uniform Securities Act, or a private placement under 33, because those are different things. In both those cases, you will not have to register the security under the Uniform Securities Act. But be careful. Just the way I want you to be careful here is because there's no such thing as an accredited investor as it relates to the Uniform Securities Act. The accredited investor is only about whether somebody can accept an invitation to invest in a private placement under 33. So if I'm a doctor in the state, I'm still entitled to the protections of the Uniform Securities Act. I'm still what is called a retail investor. Now, if you were asking about the Uniform Securities Act, that would be 10 offers in a 12-month period. Brian, what do you think about the test implications of those two questions? Likely get a test?
I always think of the 10 non-accredited investors under USA.
That's
5 under the 33 Act.
There you go. So, by the way, just in general, as a test taker, though, try and keep those straight because they're different things. The federal regulatory framework is different than the state. Would I like you to know it all? The answer is yes. But if you can't know it all, I think there's a bigger emphasis on NASAA and the Uniform Securities Act than there is federal. Would you think so, Brian?
Absolutely.
So, try and learn it all, but if you can't, pay attention to the state stuff. Okay, so let's see what we got going on in our chat here. Hi, Vidya. Happy Tuesday. All right, I love it. You're putting these registrations to work, making some money. I love it. Hey, I'm proud to be a capitalist, and I joke I'm not really joking. If you're poor and you deserve to be rich, our industry is for you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people come from very humble beginnings in our industry who have been able to make a good living for themselves and support their families. And I have some progressive friends that think everybody in our industry is involved in some criminal conspiracy. And I have to convince them that why would we do that to, take a nickel from you? So,
Dean, I have to introduce you to a few different progressive friends.
You have some that are into making money? Good.
Yes.
There you go. I love that.
I being one of them.
There you go. I'm not sure quite I understand the question. I have a window until May to take my exam.
Yeah.
Do people use all the? Yeah, you should use all the time. Or you can't take it. I don't understand. Do you understand, Brian, what he means by twice within the window time frame?
Yeah. So his window's open until May. What's that? Right. 120 days.
Right.
So does he wait until the end of May to take the exam?
Oh, I'm not sure what I mean. What's he mean by twice, though?
Well, should he take it like 2 weeks from now? So just in case.
Well, doesn't he have to open a new window? I think he has to open a new window if he misses.
Yeah, it doesn't. Don't wait till May.
Yeah, Clyde, what I would do is take a date and then reverse engineer your study plan.
Exactly.
So I just think because it's May, you don't need to necessarily make May your test date. I think Brian and I were talking, about this, and people tend to disagree. I think the number we landed on, Brian, and we're collaborating now and making our podcast, and I think we came up with a number of 80 to 120 hours to execute a study plan.
Yeah,
I think that was my number.
From a time frame standpoint, 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, so
don't worry about the window for your study period.
Yeah, I really agree with that. So Clyde, go 4 to 8 weeks. I like, give yourself time, because your study plan will start to collapse on you. It's like an option, so it starts collapsing as you get closer. So set something you're comfortable with. Not May, but 8 weeks I think is generous. So let's say 8 weeks. And then once you get the date, then reverse engineer what you're going to do in terms of how much time you're going to spend in what I call study blocks. How many study blocks a day, and you reverse engineer your study plan from that. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I put a lot of work in it. Mom gives me grief about how much stuff I probably provide you for free. And then I tell Mom, well, it's not really free because people have to watch the ads. So, every once in a while, I'll flash a Google checker. She goes, oh, well, maybe that's not a bad idea. Plenty of time. BBB, 2 months to pass the SIE is plenty of time.
Yeah, it's more than enough. Yeah.
Now, I would add, though, make sure you really invest big time into that SIE study plan. And here's why. It'll pay big, big dividends in your next exam, whether it be a 6 or whether it be a 7. I almost think, Brian, somebody could almost pass out of a 6 if they do a good job on the SIE.
The 6, yes.
I think so. And then whatever work you're doing, that will lay a good base for your 7. I mean, the options are going to be a lot more stuff, but there's going to be more stuff and more depth. But it's worth the work. It's worth the work for sure. Tara, all right. Woo-hoo. I think, when you suffer that initial misfortune, I think that victory is then sweeter. And I can't tell you how many people in our industry have suffered the initial misfortune of missing their exam. And then they get that, as Brian calls it, the P. And then that pass means, I think, a little more. And I always say, Tara, that's a passing 2 test, your 7, and a test of resiliency. And I think passing that test of resiliency is more of a leading indicator of how well you're going to do in our business. So I have a podcast that comes out next week. It says, you failed, is it over? And I go over, what you should be doing if you miss your mark. It's always better to pass the first time. I'm not suggesting people build character by suffering the misfortune of missing their mark. Vidya, one of our victorious test takers. That is so true. And I always tell people product knowledge comes from sales efforts, not taking tests.
Right.
So Brian and I differ from our friends at Past Perfect, for example. I think Past Perfect has convinced firms that they're going to accomplish 2 things with people who are using Past Perfect study materials. They're not only going to pass their Series 7, but they're going to be ready to go into production because they'll understand all the products. I call BS. I don't believe that for a minute, because product knowledge comes from sales efforts, not taking tests. So Brian and I believe that it should just be exclusively about passing the test. And, I should throw Kaplan in the mix and STC in the mix, because I think a lot of test prep vendors are guilty of that. And then you always learn more real time. So sometimes people call and complain, well, you have so many good stories. I don't have any stories. I go, I was in the business for 30, 40 years. So to have good stories, you got to get into production, right? You got to start working. So there you go. I do think that, we can give you a strong foundation on the basics. So I think if you're going to be doing options in the real world, having a good foundation on the option contract specifications,
right?
Long call, short call, certainly we do that. Right, Brian, he's doing guest appearances, First Command Team. I love it. A lot of
that was fun.
That was
a fun one. Yeah.
All right, love it.
That was fun.
I had a kind of an interesting situation. Tanner is a Marine, and he's at State Farm, and they formed a tutoring cohort or syndicate, and 6 of them was booking tutoring, which brought the cost down to like $37. I'm like, woo, so kind of fun. Anyways, the problem with having another Marine in the class is, him and I could go get sidetracked a little bit about our Marine stuff instead of again, past Perfect. Dean starts talking about being in the Marines, not on the test. I don't know, Brady. I don't know. It's it's an aim and shoot point and click question. So let's get it. If it is experimental, they're testing it for validity. And once it gets tested for validity, then they decide whether to keep it or not.
Right.
And so let's get it, right? It's 15%. So if I'm doing a $10 million share deal and, I have a good customer who wants to buy some more stock, I just expand the deal and I can do 11.5 million shares. And then I short the 1.5 million and I exercise my Greenshoe. So
I can't think it's going to be anything more than 15% overall.
Yeah, no, everybody who's seen it on the debrief, Brady, everybody who's seen it it was an aim and shoot, point and click question. The 3 styles of questions you get on your exam are recognition, 15%, practical application, current yield, for example, break even in an option, for example. Can't give up those because there's no interpretation of the right answer.
Right.
The 3rd style question you get are judgment. Yeah, that's where I don't know. About 10% of the exam, those you can miss. But again, if you overlearn things, Brady, and you're operating from abundance rather than scarcity, I like it because then you can give yourself permission on some of those judgment questions to just assign it to the universe. Guess B, assign it to the universe, and move on. There you go. Yeah, so she had a Greenshoe too. The Greenshoe just seems like it's on everybody's radar screen and it's showing up in a lot of draws. I made a little short on it. It's called the Greenshoe because the original person who used it was the Greenshoe Corporation, now a part of Wolverine. They make good work boots. You're welcome. I think 71, 72 on Kaplan. I think that's okay. I wouldn't say you need remediation. Do you think they need remediation 9 days away with a 71, 72 or just rinse and repeat, Brian?
Yeah. What test is this?
He didn't tell us. Viraja, I apologize if I'm not saying that right. Viraja, are you taking a Series 7, 6, SIE?
Is it Kaplan simulated exam?
Yeah, just put that back in the chat. And we'll circle back to you when we see in the chat on what exam you're taking. We'll give you some comments on that. If your firm is paying, if it's a Kaplan, so the evening classes are not Kaplan courses. They're just my classes. In fact, they had one of the monkey mucks Kaplan club. Hey, Dean, I say you're doing these evening things. I go, yeah, I am doing these evening things. I'm seeing what's out there in terms of the evenings. But on the Kaplan courses, you simply would register just like you're going to a Kaplan course. And it shows you the instructors, and you'll see I'm the instructor. I'll put it back up there, whatever those dates are. I always, in the first month of each quarter, I do an SIE. The second month of each quarter, I do the 7, and the third month of each quarter, I do a 66. So you would simply just pick the course that has, I think, the customer service. You can change courses, I think. I'm not sure if you book a course, if you can change it. Yeah, Jacob, the Test Geek practice finals are spot on. Spot on. So, yes. Yeah, I always love those repeats, when you get that, make that mark the second time. So, Jacob, were you, I think, I'm not sure. The other thing I got to do in my database is get to change people from first name last to last name first, because I end up having lots of Kristens and Jacobs, and I look like an idiot when I think I'm tutoring Kristen and it's Kirsten. So, but I think, Jake, I got an email from you, I think, and I think you were asking about that 66, and if you could re-enter in the chat whether we're asking about a private placement, if it is you, as it relates to the Uniform Securities Act, or a private placement as it relates to the feds, we can elaborate a little more on that for you. Is that of an AP? Wow, econ teacher word. I think, well, listen, William, I think a AP econ teacher should be able to pass or answer all the SIE and 65 econ questions, right? He passes 65 first try. So good job. That's the biggest difference, or one of the biggest differences between 65 and 66. The 65 does have some economics questions on that. I always joke, William, how embarrassing would that be if you were an AP econ teacher? You missed the econ questions on Series 7. So it was Series 7, Brian, 71, 72.
Again, was that a Kaplan? Was that a past perfect practice final?
Brian reminds me of those famous economists who they told President Truman he would ask an economics question. They would say, Mr. President, on the one hand, this, on the other hand, that. And President Truman said, if I chop off one of their hands, I'd get a straight answer from them. I think
it's definitely in the ballpark, no doubt.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to hint at, and Brian can correct me if this is where he's going with this, a 71 or 72 on past perfect is much different than a 71 or 72 on training consultants.
Yeah.
So if that's a 71, 72 on past perfect, you can add some points to that, and I don't think you're at risk. If that's a 71 or 72, we want you to push into higher ground.
Correct.
I think, we're betting we bet you're going to pass, but we would like you in higher ground.
You got
the mid 70s. So keep grinding, stay the course.
Yeah.
And if that's I don't know, Exam FX or training consultants, you still may be at risk. Would you say that, Brian?
That's exactly right.
Okay. All right. So I try not to be negative, but
I know, but you're right. See, that's why you have to know.
Well, I obviously think it is, or I would be working for STC. But I think STC is a reputable provider. Theo, I don't know how Theo is showing up as our guest. Did we invite somebody as a guest? That's weird. So Theo, I don't know how you're showing up in the guest stream instead of the regular stream. Go to YouTube if you're trying to watch this. Theo,
yeah, I think I may have done that. Yeah, she asked.
She welcome then. If you invited her, that's fine.
Well, not as a guest. I thought she just wanted access.
Theo, I don't want to be a guest.
Okay, well, they'll take you back off. Just go to the YouTube channel, Series 7 Guru, and you can log in. There's a live playlist. And you can log in from there.
I'm sorry, Series 7 what?
Series 7 Guru.
Guru. Okay, thank you.
You sure you don't want to be guest? I like your background. Are those real China back there? That's pretty good looking stuff. Well, okay, we'll see you back in the chat. Bye-bye. Remember, if you forward what I send you, Brian, that's the guest.
That's right. I didn't realize that was a guest.
No worries. She didn't look like one of those somebody up to any shenanigans.
No. I knew who she was. So.
I could tell by the fine china in the backdrop.
Yeah. And she's from your neck of the woods. She's from the Bay Area.
Oh, cool. Yeah, past perfect. I think, listen, Donovan, past perfect. Here's what I would say. It is better to have too much than not enough.
That's right.
So past perfect gives you too much. Now, that puts some people, unfortunately, at risk. Because I do think there are some people that would have been better to have had somebody make editorial decisions for them about where they should be spending time. But that's certainly better than not having enough. So, as much as I kind of, say past perfectation to weeds, it's better to know that you have enough content to get it done. I recommend a paid supplement or a free supplement to past perfect just to get confirmation of those test issues. Now, that's better than being, in my opinion, again, Donovan, too thin. I tend to think AD Baker, for example, is way too thin on the Series 7. So being fat is better than being skinny in terms of content. And again, I would still recommend a supplement for AD Baker, but for a different reason, right? We're trying to find the happy medium. I think for the most part, STC and Kaplan, Knopp and Marks hits it down the middle, right? And where you kind of need to be. And then, as Brian says, the supplements, whether it's his paid supplement, my channel is a free supplement, whereas intermediaries trying to help you bridge the gap between that content and the actual exams. You're welcome. I'll put up the class info again before we call it a night. Highest is 72. Well, like we said, we'd like you to push into some higher ground there. So, the other thing you got to do is you got to embrace the negative feedback. It's tough. I know it's tough when you miss lots of questions and you continue to miss lots of questions, but you just got to push through that. Now, I would say you can be making the mistake of pulling practice exam upon practice exam. That's not helpful. So one thing you might want to do in terms of remediation is do a practice exam. And Brian suggests that you don't do one the next day. You spend the next day doing remediation of the one you just did and going over that, laying some more base, and then doing another one. And maybe that can incrementally bring up that score. Now, I would add to that, if you have Brian's test geek final, I wouldn't use that until the end because it's pretty good. So I always tell people who buy his supplement, when they get the PDF, to put that in their drawer somewhere and use that as their last kind of intellectual inventory, because that has pretty good correlation. So if you're testing Friday, maybe you do that Wednesday and kind of get that final mark of where you're at based on a test geek practice exam. On Kaplan, we'll keep pushing. So keep pushing. Oh, I think I just got out of sequence here. Yeah, Kaplan is, Kaplan, you can keep pushing. Remember, Kaplan has the performance tracker. And that performance tracker is really, really good because it will help you find the areas that you need remediation. I think another common mistake people do is they try and remediate everything, where there might be an area you're strong in, hopefully, right? Like maybe you're strong in, for example, options. That would be great. And you say, well, I don't really need to remediate options. Give me 125 option questions. And that means that would point you to other areas you need to remediate. I would tell you that in Kaplan, Unit 2 of Kaplan is critical function 3 of the FINRA content outline. And function 3 is 91 questions on investments and suitability. So that Unit 2, in terms of the performance tracker, if you're using Kaplan, that's where you want to really make sure you're paying attention to that. Okay, cool, Jacob. Okay, so we gave you the answer, Jacob, for the Uniform Securities Act. It's 10 offers in a 12-month period. And Jacob, I appreciate you putting in your questions early. That's always helpful. So if you put in your question early, I'll put my email on this when we're all done. But then you go to the front of the queue like Jacob, and I answer your questions as soon as we start. Well, nobody's sitting down. There's nobody at Kaplan and STC that sit down together, and mine's harder than yours, and yours is, in fact, they go to conferences together, and on that level, it's not really competitive. I think it naturally happens. I'll see what Brian thinks, because, for example, I have 4 practice exams on my channel that I've written, and it's not that I'm necessarily trying to make the 4th one harder, but I go, oh my God, I've asked them that 3 different ways already. So what's another way? And by the nature of that, I think it starts to get a little, tougher. Now, I don't have the ability to randomize it, like put it all in a QBank and then spit it out in a random order. But I have heard, I don't know if it's an urban myth, that STC purposely makes each exam harder. I don't know. I can't verify that. I know Kaplan doesn't do that intentionally. What's your thoughts, Brian? Are people intentionally making things higher?
I've heard that same thing, but I've also anecdotally started to find out that STC's practice final scores are a little higher on average than mine and Kaplan.
Okay.
So they look like they are kind of over-scoring these.
Well, now that you mentioned, I just had somebody on social media. This was really weird. Same thing, Brian. They got a 70-something on yours, a 70-something on Kaplan, and like an 85 on STC. And I was like, I said, have you memorized the questions? I mean, that's just statistically really odd to me.
Yeah. I'm starting to hear that a lot too. STC is
it's weird. I don't know why that would be. I would tell you that the STC QBank, I'm not worried about STC. I have no issues with STC. The QBank is smaller, though, and so it is easier for you to encounter the same question sooner than it would be in a Kaplan QBank. So the only time I get worried about, like we're just telling somebody to push into the higher 70s, get on safer ground, so to speak, higher ground. And one of the dangers when people have high scores and they don't pass, and we're surprised. Usually what we're surprised about, because they've told us their high scores, it's that they've memorized the questions and answers rather than understood the information. So that is a danger. I consider it to be a champagne problem. It's not really a problem. I mean, that would be a better problem than you don't know this stuff. I had somebody on social media saying they're getting 40s and 50s. I said, well, then you haven't laid the base knowledge necessary to even be doing practice tests. So there's another bad piece of advice that floats around, that somehow you can pass these exams by just doing practice test after practice test after practice test and learning that way. And it's not true. The practice test should be getting your mark to market. And so sometimes that happens where somebody's telling me they got all these high scores and I think, oh, they're not at risk. And then they miss their mark. And then it dawns on me, maybe they were just memorizing questions and answers. Yeah, well, I started when I was a very young man. So young man or young woman, I don't think that's a problem. Well, you just got to keep being persistent. I was pretty persistent when I was younger. I said, what was I, 21? I was out of the Marine Corps. I said, what made this would-be Wall Street wizard worth meeting? And I said, I had an envelope where they could check yes or no. If they check no, we're not interested in hardworking, diligent people, Anyways, I got 4 interviews just being a little clever about how I came up with the interview. So I wouldn't give up. And then I would just be learning more for a learning experience than anything. At that age, I wouldn't be worried about money. Money will take care of itself in our industry, but I would worry about the best potential learning experience. And, I think you'll be able to find somebody who'll put you on the phones and customer service or, I wouldn't give up. There is a spot for 18-year-olds in the securities industry. Your thoughts, Brian?
Absolutely. No doubt.
Yeah, just keep working.
Keep going.
I mean, the initiative alone shows the thing. I would probably look for a smaller, like family-oriented firm. They tend to be, a little more into that, so look around for broker dealers in your community or your area, maybe a top producer. I'd approach it that way. Maybe ask a top producer or, who you think might be a top producer or go into an AG Edward D. Jones office there in strip malls. You can just walk right in and say, hey, I'm a young man or woman. I love the securities industry. I took my SIE. I'd love to, buy you lunch and talk about the securities industry. Who knows? You might end up being an assistant to somebody. So I would just be diligent and resilient as you do that. I have failed my Series 7 the first attempt. Any insight on time management? Well, I do have a podcast episode. I will link to it. And it's called How to Build a Study Plan. And I'll put that in there for you. I believe in doing study blocks of 45 minutes to an hour and a half. I think depending on whether you're full-time or part-time studier, it depends on how many study blocks per day you should have. And I would call that time management. You can't do all day studying this stuff. So I'd be interested as well in what would your score in terms of that. Any other advice on time management, Brian? What do you think?
Yeah, again, depending on, is he currently working the 8 hours? Does he have those family obligations? There's so many variables to this.
There is. So I will.
Right. You got to have a study block each and every single day. Yeah. You create the study block, whatever fits for your life and lifestyle, but you have to do it it's got to be part of your life.
Yeah, and we have a lot of the test prep vendors have study calendars that can be very helpful, where they actually kind of make you put in reverse engineer a study plan. So that would be something to consider. But if you check the replays, in the replays of all these lives and the timestamps, you link to something that's relevant to the discussion. In this case, I will link to building a study plan. Hello, is that you, Theo? You need more help? Well, it's kind of hard for us to help people who have questions like, how does the universe work? So I have some very good news for you. I don't know when your test date is, but help is on the way. The Geek and the Guru podcast is working now on a sequence for the 65. So it may not be published in time for you, but help is on the way. In the meantime, I highly recommend Brian's paid supplement for the 65. What is it, Brian, for $100 with 20% off? I think it's like 100.
Yeah, it's like with the 20% off, it's like 95.15 or something.
Yeah, and then I have
video course, all the PDFs, practice form, class notes. Yeah,
and then I have a Series 65 playlist, and then I would in the next Tuesday's thing. I don't know if you're joining us for the overtime session. It's full, so there's no more spots. So if you're not in it, you won't be able to get into it. But if you sign up for next Tuesday, when you are joining us in either the live stream or the overtime session, if you can be a little more particular with your question. What I mean like that is, I need more help on the 65 in economics, or I need more help on the 65 in options, or I need more help on the 65 in regulations. That would be a little more helpful for us. And it's also helpful for you because you've got to be able to kind of isolate that down a little bit, because that is one of the challenges on 65. That thing is a beast. It's a lot of stuff, that 65. Brian, your comments?
Yeah. Please be more specific. And that's kind of with all the questions tonight.
Yeah. I
Time
mean,
management, okay.
Brian,
I got a
Brian,
71 on a practice final. Okay, which one? What exam you taking? You know, we got.
I love what Brian's saying. I love it. He's you know what he's really upset about, ladies and gentlemen. What he's really upset about is he hasn't had an opportunity yet tonight to go to the whiteboard. That's what he's upset about. So if you have a question that is whiteboard friendly, please do that so we can give Brian his whiteboard fix for tonight. 20 tests. Wow. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest with you. Yeah. I mean, I think I always want you to do more rather than less. So I guess it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Well, there we go. Investment vehicles. Well, get a little smaller.
Okay, now we're down to 32 questions.
I'll comment on investment vehicles. I think people underestimate. Brian and I have talked about this backstage. And when people miss the mark on 65, I think, Brian, we've agreed it's mostly investment vehicles that does them in.
Yeah, sure is.
And it is usually people who are what I call tabula rasa, blank slate. They're coming to the 65 without a lot of background on investment vehicles. And a little bit of hubris, perhaps. Doesn't sound like you have hubris in your comments, but a lot of people, oh, what can they ask me about this? I don't know. Well, quite a bit, actually. I would also tell you lots of mutual fund questions. Make sure you really can compare an open-end fund with a closed-end fund. There you go. We got Brian to get a whiteboard fix there. You see what he's got on the board? Debt securities, mutual funds, derivatives, alternatives analysis. Are you leading out equity securities on purpose?
Yeah, these are the areas that give people the most difficulty.
Okay. So there you go. So he's saying that people don't come back and say they missed the mark because of common stock or preferred stock.
Right.
I don't know if I don't see Erica in the chat tonight, but she's asked me to put a bond class on the evening schedule. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but maybe. But we do have that in the playlist. So if you go to the 65 playlist, there is videos for each and every one of these subject areas. And in fact, there's almost too many. I mean, there's like 52 videos on various investment vehicles. Well, again, so producers, we love that. But Brian and I don't know what chapters 5 and 8 are on STC. We do know bonds, though, good news, and options. So I think you said you're taking a 7. So if there were truth in labeling, I think the Series 7, a lot of people refer to the Series 7 as the stockbroker's exam, but I think it should be called the bond broker's exam.
Yeah,
there are way more questions on bonds than they are stocks. So that is definitely something you want to get fixed. Now, I would ask you, what are you scoring on the bonds? So you will know whether there's remediation necessary or not. So if you're struggling with the bond chapter, maybe it's time to take some chapter quizzes on 5 through 8 and see how you score on those chapter quizzes. Same for options. You maybe take an options thing and score it up and see how you do on that. Brian, any thoughts?
No.
Okay.
You got it.
There you go, Cynthia. I love it. You're working hard. I love it. Cynthia, just based on the time I spent with you, I don't think you're at risk. And here's why: you're dedicated, you're disciplined, you're organized. So that's the kind of thing we look for in a successful test taker. So circle back when you get the diagnostic done, and let's just confirm that. I think it's going to be a score that confirms what I just said. But if not, by the way, that score would be 70 plus. 70 plus, we're in striking distance where we need to be. Below 70, people 60 to 70, you're still at risk. We have many people who their last score is a 60 plus and they still pass. It's just at risk, and that's not where you want to be, right? You want to have that margin of safety. So circle back. Let us know what your score was. Well, I think we answered that already. This is really kind of a sin. So when you miss the mark, it's one of the things I think is a sin, and here's why. Because you should have known the time management by doing a practice test. So if I were your accountability partner, I'd be upset with this, because we should have done a practice test with a time clock to know what it takes us to work through that number of performance opportunities. So I had somebody, Jodovan, I hope I pronounced that correctly. He was a Schwab person, and he was worried about his scores, and he kept running out of time. And I said, listen, my friend, tough love time. I don't care what your score is. You got to get this done in the time allocated. So this next exam I'm about to hand you, you need to have it turned back into me in a timely fashion. And it was in a snail mail version, dead tree version, Jonathan. He handed it back to me. I ripped it up and I threw it in the trash. He goes, well, we don't know what score is. I said, the score wasn't important because it doesn't matter. What mattered in this exercise is, can you get through the number of performance opportunities you need to? Now, I don't know, bad strategy. It's buffet, take what you like, leave what you don't. Bad strategy, if you have a time constraint. So test question number one, make sure, or suggestion number one, make sure you do enough practice tests moving forward that you know what that feels like rhythm-wise to get through the performance opportunities. I don't know if you did this or not, but I don't think it's a good idea. Creating a subset of questions you want to go back to because it starts reminding you got these questions. And I think that can be very distracting. So I don't know if you did that. That's another bad test-taking strategy. The insight would be to do a practice test, get it done in the timely fashion, get a score, and then work on the score later. First, work on getting that done in a timely fashion. Brian, your thoughts?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, the paralysis by analysis, it's easy for a lot of people to sit there and start overthinking the test questions and overthinking the answer choices. Sometimes what you might want to do, you can't do it on every question, but when you read a test question, answer it in your head first, pick the answer that best matches what your answer was, pick it and move the heck on.
Aim and shoot, point and click. You got to keep it moving. You got to keep it moving. If it's something you're looking at, you don't know the answer, it's not going to come to you by looking at the question for 10 minutes.
That's right.
So again, that's why we said you want to have a margin of safety in your practice test scores, because this is another thing that's important, right? If you're in that 70 range we would like you in, then you feel more comfortable guessing B, assignment of the universe, and moving on to the next performance opportunities. Where if you're not in that safety area, every question becomes material. All right, we're getting Brian now where he's being able to use his whiteboard.
Yeah.
Keep it simple, Seattle.
Yeah, I'm in Seattle because I don't like that other word. So keep it simple. That's my point. Keep it simple. Yeah. Don't overthink this stuff. It shouldn't in any way take you 3 hours.
My number one thing would be, if I were your real accountability partner, I'd want a practice test from you in the time allocated to take the test. Yeah. Best ways to get away from systematic risk. Well, the systematic risk prevails despite diversification. So, Nico, the test question about systematic risk is you can't avoid it through diversification. Now, I would follow that up with saying you're taking an SIE, so I wouldn't worry too much about this. 65, 66, under modern portfolio theory, we'd be looking to reduce risk through negative correlation. But I wouldn't worry about that on the SIE. I would know on the SIE, non-systematic risk or selection risk can be mitigated through diversification. I would know that. I would know the best way to do that is with a mutual fund. And then I would know risk prevails still if you're diversified with systematic risk. Brian, your thoughts?
Yeah, getting away from systematic risk, buy a CD. Sorry.
Caesar, how are you, my friend? Greetings and salutations. Past the SI failed the 7 once. No FINRA seems to wait. Well, I don't know if that's true. I mean, you always can feel something that may or may not be there. There's no design. The test is completely random. So FINRA doesn't have any kind of algorithm that's giving you questions at certain times and places. So I think you're just feeling that because of your anxiety. I think your anxiety led to that, not FINRA. So
yeah,
I think you got it backwards there. I think, Charissa, most people think there's more math than there is. Yeah, it's very possible, Charissa, that we could ask you how much math you saw could be 0. I would be able to do current yield. I would definitely be able to do that. I would definitely know some of the balance sheet calculations, working capital, current ratio, quick ratio. More often than not, though, Brian, I think we'll concur, more often than not, they're actually asking not to do the math, but to recognize the math, the input versus the output. So I guess, Charissa, I would tell you that if you tell us you missed your mark because of math, I'm not sure we're going to believe you. How do you buy Brian's materials? Do you think we should tell him how to buy your materials?
Nah, let him guess.
So is that the best place or to your email?
Yeah,
Brian?
that's the video course along with all the.
Okay, so you go to testgeekexamprep.teachable.com,
There you go.
and that's how you can buy Brian's test. I always like to nick his margin a little bit. So remember, Guru 20 gets you a 20% discount. He doesn't need that extra 20%. All right. About the thank you. Hold on. Let's see.
Yeah,
I go back. About to purchase Test Geek option chapter. Got an entry from Yana. It was so easy to understand. Well, thank you. Yeah, I think they can buy your option part separately, right, Brian?
I have a separate Series 7 options video course. I just took the option stuff from the Series 7, cut it out, and offered it separately because some people just want options help.
Yeah, Brian is excellent on making options simple. He keep it simple, Seattle principle. But I would suggest, I don't know his pricing, but I would really recommend you go all in and get the entire Test Geek supplement rather than just buying the chapter. Do you know, Brian, what's the difference in pricing from the option?
Yeah, it's 119 versus 89.
Yeah, I don't, so as I understand when you're starting out, resources can be important, but it's not time to be frugal. So if you have the resources, I would recommend going all in and getting his entire video series and the entire quick notes and the entire practice test if you can. Well, long and low. So we mean long maturities and lowest coupon would be the most volatile. I don't know what you mean by close to par. I'm not sure what that, Cynthia, mean by that, but you should definitely be in an answer set, be able to pick out the bond that's most volatile by going to the longest maturity and then the lowest coupon. Now, if you're taking a 65, 66, you should be able to do that same thing. And then the fancy word for that, I'm oversimplifying, which is my job, but it would be duration. There you go, Series 7. 65, well, 65 is, in the ballpark. I think we're coming in on 8 minutes, gentlemen. So I'm going to link to the lecture I have on this, and I can do it there. And if you sign up for next week's overtime session, I can do it there. I don't think it lends itself well. I'll let Brian decide. Brian, do you want, I don't know, with 8 minutes left, do we have time to do anything on a straddle or spread?
Well, let's just do one thing very quickly. I'm sure he's familiar somewhat because everybody knows
the matrix. The matrix. I call the options matrix. What do you call it, Brian?
The options aerobics diagram. So this at least tells you which options are in the long straddle, the short straddle, the call spread, and the put spreads. So these tell you at least which options are in those. I'm trying to do this very quickly. So
yeah. You know what I would say, Jonathan, I would be menu driven on this. So
yeah,
Brian's first point is you have to be able to identify the options strategy, because if you can't, you'll be stuck. Yeah. So on the straddle, there's pretty straightforward. You got to be able to identify it, calculate the break evens, determine where it's profitable, when to use it.
Right.
4 points. On the spread, you got to be able to identify it, debit or credit, exercise or expire, widen or narrow, max gain, max loss, break even, bullish or bearish. So there's 8 things. Yeah. So I will link, Jonathan, if you go back to the replay sometime tonight or tomorrow morning, I'll link to my lectures on both of those subjects for you. There's also in the replay list a class that I taught on spreads and straddles that you can replay, with some students that I did, and that's there for you. So there's a lot of video resources for that. And if you join me for the next overtime session where I have a whiteboard, I'm more than happy to do it there as well. Well, credit spreads are the different. Well, you mean there's two
yield curves?
Yeah. So I'm assuming because you have yield curves in here that you're talking about a credit spread and the difference between what low credit quality bonds pay and high credit quality bonds. Right? Spread always means difference, by the way. And so right now we would see the credit spread widening because people are nervous, right? So when people are nervous, they get out of their low credit quality investments, bonds, causing the price to go down, the yield to go up, and they go into treasuries, causing the price to go up and the yield to go down. So if that's widening, that credit spread, that would be a negative economic indicator. If it's narrowing, that would be a positive economic indicator. And then yield curve is the difference between short-term bonds versus long-term bonds. And there the question is about an inverted yield curve. An inverted yield curve is when shorter-term bonds pay more than longer-term bonds. And again, that's a negative economic indicator. It is the indicator for a recession. So there's Brian's right. That's a normal yield
That's
curve.
the normal curve. And
Yeah.
then during recessionary periods, it flips.
Yeah, because the Fed right now, a good example, you're taking the test at such an opportune time.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah, the Fed is raising short-term rates to try and slow down the economy demand. And, usually they don't do the mythical soft landing. Usually when they're trying to beat inflation, they do a hard landing. And the way they do that is when short-term rates get past that, that's a sign we've probably gone to a bridge too far, so to speak. I'm thinking about putting an economics lecture into the evening class schedule. I haven't decided that yet. But again, I will link to that, 5530. I have 2 different economics lectures, and I'll link one of those to the replay. All right, we're getting towards drawing time. Greetings. I'm in my mid-70s, Purdue University Global. Used to be part of Kaplan and finance. My goal is equity, commodity, energy trader for a firm or fund. Okay, well, that's great. Let's see. Seems like a two-parter. I found your channel. Plan to graduate. When and how should I approach the particular certifications? Well, these are series exams. You can take the SIE Emerald without sponsorship. You can do that on your own right now if you'd like. You can do the 63, 65, and 66 on your own. 63, 66 would do you no good because it's a co-requisite unless you have a 6 or a 7. But the 65 can be taken without sponsorship. So there's nothing preventing you from taking an SIE and a 65. With a 65, you would be employable as for an investment advisory firm that's fee-based only. So they're not, I don't like calling them certifications. They're not, you've passed a series. You have any comments on that, Brian?
No, you're absolutely right. No, absolutely right. Dead on.
Eric, I'm worried you keep showing up at the very end. I think you're just showing up to get your drawing. I was talking about you earlier and you were not to be found anywhere. Cool. Yeah, I'm with you. We want to get this done so you can. The lowest coupon is going to be the most volatile with interest rates. We're not talking about credit risk. Credit risk is a separate issue. And you get higher interest on a junk bond because of credit risk. The question about volatility is not about credit risk. It's about interest rate risk. Those are different risks in bonds. Seattle is not Cynthia. Okay, so Seattle it is. Let's see. This will be our last couple. Whoop. Yeah, well, none of that's on what Emerald. None of that is relevant to our discussion of passing your series exam.
Not at all.
Okay, so we decided the word's going to be Seattle. Let me get the
and on a glorious day, which is not big.
Are you having a great day there? When Seattle's beautiful, it's beautiful. But boy, I'll tell you, every time I'm there, it's so much rain.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get to my settings here. Whoop. Present. Share screen.
Well, there's too much rain for me most times too, Dean.
That's you get the best of both worlds now, right? Because you said
that's why I bought the house in Las Vegas.
Yeah, you got your Vegas thing.
Yeah.
I know every time I go to do this thing, it messes. My mouse starts acting up. Okay, so put Seattle into the chat. Oh, look at that. You guys are already Johnny on the spot.
Wow, look at that. Yes.
We'll give you a couple more minutes. Well, I shouldn't say a couple more minutes. Let's call it 20 seconds. Yeah. So for those of you signed up for the live stream overtime session, we take a 15-minute break and I'll open up the classroom in 6:15 for you. If you're not in the overtime session, it's too late because you have to register for it. And you can register at Dean Tenney tutoring.setmore.com and you can sign up. There's some spots for next Tuesday. I don't do them every Tuesday. If I'm tired, I don't do them. All right, here we go. We're drawing. Let's see who won last week. Jessen, I think I don't see him in the chat, but the only rule is you can't win 2 weeks in a row.
Drum roll, please. And the winner is
Virja. Woo!
there you go.
So what you need to do is you need to send me an email with an hour of this being over, claiming that you are the winner so I can set up the coaching call for you. It's a coaching call of 30 minutes. It's recorded and shared to the rest of our channel. It could be anything you want. I just don't call it tutoring because I don't want people to get confused about the free coaching call versus paid tutoring. So send me that email. We'll find out, pick a time that's convenient for you and I'll send you your invite. And then, like I say, we can discuss whatever series you want. We can do practice questions, whatever you'd like to do. I think Nico want to do some practice questions together, and that's what we did in his coaching call. So you can, if you want, we can talk about what you might want to do with your 30-minute coaching call. If you don't want it, you can assign it to someone else and you can share it with others if you'd like. All right, let me get rid of this. All right. Remember, inch by inch, your exam is a cinch. Yard by yard, your exam is hard. And Brian, what do you always say?
Remember, you take the test. Don't let the test take you.
Okay, everybody. I'll see some of you 15 minutes from now, and the rest of you I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
See ya.